Yeah, they can walk up, Chiswick High Road with a skinhead and the jackboots, giving it the old Z car. That's what people would love. Yeah.
We're very told. We even let one of them become mayor. But we regret that. That's not your right. Well, I've got you. Guess who the guest is on next year's live full disclosure recording?
I was just saying, amazing LBC caller, the best caller of the week. Now, his name is Mark, and yes, I know it's James O'Brien, but there's a reason why, and I'll explain later on. But the topic of the conversation was about the racist comments by Donald Trump about Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, and Farage not condemning the racist comments. But what this caller said not only blew my mind, but he also really, really made me think as well.
Hi, James. Look, where do we begin with this? The starting point is that if Sadiq Khan was a white man, this simply wouldn't be happening to him. But the point is this Renee...
Well, you couldn't accuse him, you couldn't lie about him wanting to introduce Sharia law. That is probably confined to people of brown skin, although there are white Muslims. So a white Muslim mayor could be lied about in the same way by Donald Trump, perhaps.
But let's just call it what it is. This kind of racism against Asians always existed. And now what they've done is that they've replaced the horrible P word with calling the Muslim word. And that's all it is. And these racists, they know what they do, and they know why they hide behind certain words. Because, James, in a nutshell, now, I've listened to you for about 13 years now. And one thing you said is Occam's razor. Sometimes there's often a simple answer to the most complex of questions. And it is that they just want freedom from consequences. It's not that you can't say what you want. You can. Just like Lucy Connolly found out, but there is consequences. Now, I'm sure your producer told you what I do for a living, and I've plucked up...
she didn't, actually.
I happen to be a barrister, and I can say there's 16 racially aggravated offences, religiously aggravated assault, there's harassment offences, there's inciting racial hatred, and I go on and on. But any one of these offences can land you in court. And as long as these offences are still here, the racists go out of their way to say they're not racist because the law still works and works effectively. And that is their problem.
I see what you mean. I wouldn't have thought of it like that. But trying to actually undermine the legal protections is the rationale for all this nonsense about two-tier justice. Farage wrote a piece for the Daily Mail in which he said, we all know that there are limits to freedom of speech. I thought everyone agreed that incitement to violence was one of them, or incitement to racial hatred. I forget his exact words. And then 48 hours later, Lucy Connolly walks onto the stage at his own party conference. And they claim that there's two-tier... I mean, what's that? Two-tier truth? So they don't like the laws. Saw it a little bit when, after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and people started having kittens if you repeated the words that he spoke. So freedom of speech without any consequences at all, up to and including being reminded of what you did while exercising that freedom of speech. It's surreal, right?
Exactly. We live in an era where being called a racist is actually worse than the actual act of racism, and it's gone mad. But
you're right.
It is fueled by the media, and let me explain why. The Greens more or less have the same amount of MPs in Parliament as Reform. Why is it that I can't even cough without seeing Nigel Farage in every single tabloid, every single news feed, every single clip? Yeah, I don't hear nothing about the Green Party. Same amount of membership, maybe even more. But you hear nothing about them, nothing about the Lib Dems. It's a business, hatred is a business model that sells, but the thing that kills the racism and their biggest bugbear is that if I'm a black man, and if I was called the N-word, recorded it, and you called the police, they will be arrested. They'll start with their two-tier, but a judge will lock them up or put them on community service, and they will lose their job. So we have protection criminally, and obviously the Equality Act still stands, and we have protections there, and they hate that. So anything they say that is racist, there is a consequence, and they don't like that. That's the problem. They know for what they can say.
So when I've asked, and I'm not asking it rhetorically, but I think I have answers in my mind when I ask the question, what is it that they think they're not allowed to say? You're suggesting very convincingly that it's the things that are currently protected by law.
Yes.
What else is there? What else is there?
There is nothing else. It's freedom of consequence. I think we've got to the point where Steve Bannon said that people should be proud to be racist, but again, it involves the dismantling of various racially aggravated offences and equality law. And my fear is, and God, I pray it doesn't happen, if Farage and them get to power with a majority, that's what they will aim to do. And that's what people want. People have voted for, sadly, Brexit. And, the current dinghy crisis is all caused because of the Dublin 2, because we left Brexit. It's so obvious. It's infuriating, but people will keep voting against their own interests because
the hatred is so intoxicating, because it works so well, and that is what the button Donald Trump pressed yesterday was the button that said, "Be frightened of brown people."
Exactly.
They're coming for you.
Working classes have been manipulated. It's absolutely disgusting the way they've been treated. I hate it. It's horrible what they've done to them. People that I've gone to school with, good friends in school, the way we played in the playground, and the bio that they're posting online is insane. It's like that we weren't friends, like we weren't drinking out the same cups and sharing up the same bag of chips together in the 80s. It's gone nuts. It's absolutely terrible. But the thin line, and I don't know if I could call it the blue thin line, is the law, is the last line of the defence. People like us, the courts, the judges, who they hate us, they call us two-tier and all of the rest of it. But just one thing to consider is that if it's so two-tier, you had the Unite Britain or whatever it was called march the other day, no facial recognition cameras, and yet Notting Hill Carnival had facial recognition cameras. Where's the two-tier, please, James? 25 people arrested there.
Well, you're the lawyer.
26 people.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, if you put me on the spot, that the policing decision, the operational decision, was based upon the nature of the event. So a march and a congregation of people is a completely different proposition to 3 days of carousing on the streets. They're not. To me, they're not comparable events. But I take your point, and you've said two things that I really hope I know that I'll remember. The first, not for the first time, Mark, someone has made me recognise that you can say in the space of a sentence what it took me 20 minutes to say at the top of the show, which is we live in a country where being called a racist is widely regarded as worse than being a victim of racism. And that is what the whole... And the other thing is, I hadn't actually got my head around the attack on the law. I thought it was all about human rights and it being too difficult to deport people. But it's actually... the whole two-tier rhetoric is based upon really wanting to go back to the good old days when you could put a sign in your boarding house window saying no dogs, no blacks, no Irish.
Yeah, they can walk up, Chiswick High Road with the skinhead and the jackboots, giving it the old Z car. That's what people would love, but that doesn't exist. But, these kind of things are really troubling. Let me just add this, James. The language that we have used in this country. Look, we say, and I'm sure you'll agree, James, that UK, Britain is a tolerant country.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's easy to forget sometimes.
In its normal English language, what does tolerate mean? You don't tolerate your wife and kids, you love them. Surely the language like we embrace other cultures.
Well, they hate that, don't they? That's what diversity means. That's what multiculturalism means. But
tolerant means that we...
boasting about being tolerant. So what you're boasting about is the fact that we're not smacking you over the head or graffitiing your front door. We're very tolerant. Yeah. We're very we even let one of them become mayor. But we regret that. That's not your right. That's not equality.
There's so much things that could be better. What frustrates me now is we have a Labour government and Keir Starmer is sitting on his hands with this because he wants to please the red wall, or wherever these people come from. Come out, for goodness sake, for public decency, and say this is wrong.
The word is that he's doing that on Friday. We shall watch with great interest, I think, Mark, you and I. And I'm going to point something else out as well, is that I'm white, and I've got this job, and I'm calling it out. But I'm calling it out from the position
you and Gary Lineker. The last thing I'd say is Gary Lineker won an award.
National Television Award, presenter of the year. 23 years it went to Anton Deck, and this year it went to Gary.
Public vote. Now, everybody knows what Gary Lineker stands for. He's a man of his word, and he's called things out. He stands up for black people, brown people, other people, a public vote. So if that is the true trajectory of this country, it is the media that is overblind this racist thing.
Yeah, because, listen, a public vote is not the most reliable measure of popularity, but the bigger the vote, the more reliable it becomes. And, of course, the question of who he speaks for in the context of the UK media, who is on that platform with him, metaphorically speaking, is why I went in this morning on the way that I went in. Well, I've got you. Guess who the guest is on next year's live full disclosure recording?
Hopefully not Nigel Farage.
It's 10:45.
Wasn't he amazing? Now, the reason why I listen to James O'Brien's show, just simply because while I'm looking for material or sorting out material to upload, I just listen to it in the background, and later on in the day, I'm basically either recording or editing maybe that material and stuff like that. And sometimes I'll just sit there and hear a call, and it just stops me in the tracks, and I'll just start listening. It's just as simple as that, though. But I recognise James O'Brien isn't everybody's cuppa, but I just love this caller because he was spot on about his comments. They're simply racist, and he's spot on about not being able to look out your window or even open up your social media account without having to look at Farage's thick, stupid grin on his face. But his example about tolerance was absolutely brilliant. I've never said anything like, oh, I tolerate my beloved friends and loved ones, or some stranger on a bus who sits next to me, because for me, that's just a friend I've not met yet, and whatever their colour, culture or language they speak, it doesn't matter to me. Absolutely brilliant. He was absolutely spot on, but what do you guys think? Wasn't he absolutely brilliant? And for me, best caller of the week? Let me know down below, and I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.